To understand the mystery of Harry Houdini's final trick and why it continues to shock audiences even a century later, we must begin with the man himself. Before his death, before the speculation, before the legends of curses and conspiracies, there was a boy named Eric Weiss, the son of a Hungarian rabbi who would one day transform himself into the world's most famous magician. Houdini's story is not only about death-defying escapes and showmanship, it is about a relentless pursuit of greatness, a hunger for immortality, and a man whose ambition and determination rewrote the boundaries of human performance. Childhood in poverty. Houdini was born Eric Weiss in Budapest, Hungary, on March 24, 1874. His family immigrated to the United States when he was still a child, settling in Appleton, Wisconsin. Life was not easy. His father, Rabbi Meir Weiss, struggled to support the family, and young Eric grew up in poverty. These early hardships forged a resilience that would define him for the rest of his life. Even as a boy, Houdini displayed a fascination with performance and the art of illusion. He idolized strongmen, trapeze artists, and magicians, admiring their ability to captivate audiences with seemingly superhuman feats. At the age of 9, he performed as Eric, the Prince of the Air, a trapeze artist in small local shows. That first taste of applause sparked something inside him, the belief that he could escape his humble beginnings through entertainment. Reinvention as Houdini. As a teenager, he began experimenting with magic tricks and escapes. He read voraciously, studied famous magicians, and practiced tirelessly. Inspired by the French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, considered the father of modern conjuring, Eric adopted a stage name, Houdini. Adding the I gave the name an Italian flourish, suggesting mystery and sophistication. It was more than a name change. It was a reinvention of identity, a declaration that he would not be bound by the limitations of his birth. With the new identity came a relentless work ethic. Houdini traveled from town to town, performing in dime museums, sideshows, and beer halls. His early tricks, card manipulation, sleight of hand, small escapes, earned modest attention, but he was not yet a star. For years he struggled, performing for sparse crowds, barely scraping together enough money to survive. But Houdini was no ordinary performer. He was ambitious, hungry, and unwilling to settle for mediocrity. He knew he needed a gimmick that would set him apart, the birth of the escape artist. That gimmick arrived in the form of handcuffs. In the late 1890s, Houdini began performing handcuff escapes as the centerpiece of his act. Unlike card tricks, which audiences had seen countless times, the sight of a man slipping free from iron restraints was electrifying. Houdini took it further, inviting local police to lock him in their own handcuffs before performances. Each time he escaped, his reputation grew. Soon he was escaping from chains, ropes, and shackles. He allowed himself to be bound by skeptical officers, challenging them to tie him as tightly as possible. No matter how impossible the restraint seemed, Houdini always freed himself. His mastery of locks, his contortionist flexibility, and his iron will combined to create a spectacle unlike anything audiences had seen before. It was this innovation, transforming the magician into an escape artist, that propelled Houdini to stardom. By the turn of the century, he was performing across the United States, and his fame was spreading internationally. Breakthrough in Europe. In 1900, Houdini traveled to Europe, where his career exploded. London, Paris, and Berlin audiences were captivated by his escapes. He challenged police departments across the continent, daring them to confine him with their strongest restraints. Every time he emerged free, he embarrassed the authorities and thrilled the crowds. Newspapers called him the Handcuff King. It was in Europe that Houdini began to refine his showmanship. He understood that the key to success was not just escaping, but doing so with drama and flair. He learned to build suspense, to stretch out his performances so audiences were perched on the edge of their seats, hearts pounding with anticipation. By the time he returned to America, Houdini was a global sensation. His escapes were front-page news, and his name was synonymous with the impossible. Escapes beyond imagination. As his fame grew, Houdini pushed the boundaries of his stunts. Handcuffs and ropes were no longer enough. he devised increasingly elaborate challenges designed to test the limits of human endurance and terrify audiences. He escaped from locked jail cells, sealed crates, and underwater chambers. He had himself shackled and thrown into rivers, only to surface minutes later, gasping for air but triumphant. He dangled upside down from skyscrapers, freeing himself from straitjackets in full view of thousands of onlookers gathered below. These escapes were not mere tricks, they were ordeals. Houdini trained his body relentlessly, developing extraordinary lung capacity, strength, and pain tolerance. He studied locks obsessively, learning to pick them in seconds. His wife, Bess Houdini, often assisted, smuggling him hidden keys or helping to create distractions. But at the heart of each performance was Houdini's iron will. He refused to fail, no matter the danger. Audiences were enthralled. His escapes symbolized more than entertainment. In an era of rapid industrialization, when people felt increasingly confined by modern life, Houdini represented liberation, the human spirit breaking free from the shackles of authority and control, the price of fame. But Houdini's relentless pursuit of spectacle came at a cost. Each new trick had to be more daring, more dangerous than the last. He was constantly pushing the boundaries of safety, risking his life for applause. Behind the curtain, he endured injuries, exhaustion, and near-death experiences. He nearly drowned during water escapes. He dislocated shoulders and suffered broken bones. His body, though powerful, bore the scars of a man who had pushed it to its absolute limits. The pressure was not only physical, but psychological. Houdini was obsessed with control, with proving that he could conquer any restraint. This obsession drove him to extremes, but it also left him restless and paranoid. He feared imitators, distrusted rivals, and guarded his secrets fiercely. Fame had made him powerful, but it had also made him vulnerable. Houdini the Debunker. As he rose to fame, Houdini also took on a new mission, exposing frauds. At the turn of the century, spiritualism was booming. Mediums claimed they could contact the dead, conducting seances filled with ghostly knocks, floating objects, and whispered voices. Many grieving families sought comfort from these practices. Houdini, however, despised spiritualist frauds. He saw them as predators who exploited vulnerable people for money. Using his knowledge of illusions, he exposed their tricks. Hidden wires, ventriloquism, sleight of hand. He attended seances undercover, then revealed the deceptions to the public. His crusade against spiritualism earned him enemies. Many mediums despised Houdini and sought to discredit him. Some even claimed to curse him, declaring that he would pay for his skepticism. While Houdini dismissed such claims as superstition, the threats added another layer of danger to his life. Ironically, his crusade also fueled his legend. To audiences, Houdini was not only a master escape artist, but a defender of truth, a man who could see through lies and emerge victorious. His reputation grew not just as a performer, but as a cultural force, building a legacy. By the 1910s and 1920s, Houdini was more than a magician, he was an institution. He starred in silent films, wrote books about his escapes, and even testified before Congress. He was a celebrity in the modern sense, using the media to build and protect his image. But as he aged, the risks of his performances grew more severe. He was no longer the young man who could shrug off injuries. His body, battered by years of punishment, began to show wear. Still, Houdini refused to slow down. He believed his legacy depended on always delivering the impossible. This drive for immortality, this refusal to accept limits, is what set the stage for his final act. The road to the final trick. By the mid-1920s, Houdini was experimenting with stunts that were more dangerous than ever. His Chinese water torture cell, in which he was locked upside down in a tank of water, left audiences gasping in fear. He continued to perform straitjacket escapes, dangling from buildings in front of thousands. He performed even when injured, refusing to disappoint his fans. But behind the spectacle, there were warning signs. Houdini was exhausted, his body breaking down. He was also surrounded by enemies. Spiritualists angry at his debunking, rivals eager to see him fail. And then came the mysterious events of October 1926, when Houdini collapsed after being punched in the stomach by a college student. Within days, he was dead. The official cause was peritonitis from a ruptured appendix. But rumors spread that Houdini's death was no accident, that it was, in fact, his final trick. Shrouded in secrets, producers, rivals, and perhaps even his family tried to hide. Performers had long retired from punishing physical stunts. But Houdini was not most performers. Even as his body showed signs of wear, he refused to slow down. For him, each performance was not just entertainment, but a battle with mortality. His audiences expected danger, and Houdini never wanted to disappoint them. What no one could have predicted was that his final trick would unfold not on stage, but in the shadows of a dressing room, where a moment of hubris, a punch to the stomach, and a chain of decisions would spiral into one of the greatest mysteries in entertainment history, the Montreal Incident. On October 22, 1926, Houdini was in Montreal performing at the Princess Theatre. Earlier that day, he had welcomed a group of students from McGill University into his dressing room. Among them was J. Gordon Whitehead, a young man fascinated by Houdini's famed ability to withstand blows to the body. Whitehead asked Houdini if it was true that he could take any punch to the stomach. Houdini, reclining on a couch and nursing injuries from recent performances, confirmed the legend. Before Houdini could properly brace himself, Whitehead delivered several sudden, hard punches to his abdomen. Witnesses said the magician winced, his face tightening with pain, but he waved off the incident and continued preparing for his performance. What happened next is the subject of endless debate. Within days, Houdini fell gravely ill. Doctors diagnosed him with appendicitis and urged immediate surgery. But Houdini, stubborn and unwilling to cancel shows, insisted on performing despite his pain. By the time he finally consented to treatment, it was too late. His appendix had ruptured, causing peritonitis, a deadly infection. On October 31, 1926, Halloween night, Houdini died in Detroit. He was only 52 years old. The official story, the official cause of death, was peritonitis from a ruptured appendix, likely aggravated by the blows from Whitehead. At first glance, it seemed tragically simple. Houdini had ignored his doctors, continued to push his body beyond reason, and paid the ultimate price. But the simplicity of that explanation left many unconvinced. Houdini was known for his extraordinary physical resilience, his ability to survive ordeals that would kill other men. Could a few punches from a student really bring down the world's greatest escape artist? And why, after decades of survival, would Houdini die from something so mundane? Almost immediately, rumors spread that his death was not what it seemed. The Spiritualist Conspiracy, one of the most enduring theories about Houdini's death, involves the spiritualist movement he had spent years debunking. By the 1920s, Houdini had become the most famous skeptic in the world, exposing fraudulent mediums and humiliating spiritualists in public. He even testified before Congress, calling for laws to regulate seances and ban false claims of contacting the dead. This crusade made him powerful enemies. Many spiritualists considered him a traitor and a threat to their livelihoods. Some openly cursed him, predicting that he would not live much longer. In the years following his death, whispers spread that Houdini had been assassinated. Some claim that J. Gordon Whitehead, the student who punched him, was not acting alone, that he was part of a spiritualist plot to silence Houdini once and for all. According to this theory, the blows were deliberate, targeted not just at testing Houdini's resilience, but at ending his life. Was Whitehead manipulated by others? Was he a pawn in a larger conspiracy? There is no definitive proof, but the coincidence was tantalizing. Houdini died in the midst of his most aggressive campaign against spiritualism, and his death seemed almost too convenient for his enemies. The delayed surgery debate. One of the most puzzling aspects of Houdini's final days is not only the punch in Montreal or the mysterious timing of his illness, but his decision to delay medical treatment even as his body began to fail. Appendicitis, untreated, is almost always fatal. By the 1920s, doctors understood that the condition required immediate surgery. Yet, when Houdini began experiencing sharp abdominal pain, fever, and nausea, he refused to rest and pressed ahead with his performances. Why would a man of such intelligence and discipline ignore the warnings of his own body? Historians and medical experts have debated this question for decades. Some argue that Houdini's stubbornness sealed his fate. He had built his career on superhuman endurance, convincing audiences, and perhaps himself, that nothing could harm him. To admit weakness, to cancel shows, would have meant undermining the persona he had so carefully cultivated. Houdini was not simply a performer, he was a symbol of resilience. The idea that a common illness could defeat him would have been, in his mind, unthinkable. Others, however, suggest that Houdini's situation was more complicated. Even if he had agreed to surgery immediately, it is far from certain that he would have survived. In the 1920s, surgery carried enormous risks. Anesthesia was crude, infection control was limited, and antibiotics had not yet been discovered. For many patients, the operation itself proved deadly. Once an appendix ruptured, peritonitis often spread unchecked, overwhelming the body's defenses. In this light, Houdini's decision to delay may not have changed the outcome. His fate, some argue, was sealed the moment his appendix ruptured. Still, the fact that Houdini performed through unbearable pain has fueled speculation. Some believe he drastically underestimated the seriousness of his condition because of his lifelong belief in his own invincibility. He had escaped from shackles, jails, and water-filled chambers. He had survived being buried alive. He had built an entire identity on the premise that nothing could contain him. In such a mindset, to surrender to illness may have felt like the ultimate betrayal of who he was. For Houdini, weakness was unacceptable. Admitting defeat to an infection may have seemed worse than death itself. His decision reflects the paradox of his life. The same drive that made him a legend also destroyed him. The delayed surgery debate is more than a medical question. It is a window into Houdini's psyche, into the iron will that refused to yield even when his body demanded mercy. The curse of Houdini. If the medical explanations were unsatisfying to fans, the myths that grew after Houdini's death offered something more dramatic. One of the most enduring is the belief that Houdini was cursed. The curse theory emerged almost immediately after his death. Spiritualists, furious at Houdini for exposing their fraudulent seances, had long predicted his downfall. Some even proclaimed that he would pay for mocking the spirits. When Houdini collapsed and died just days after the infamous punch, on Halloween night, no less, many saw it as supernatural justice. According to the legend, Houdini had cheated death too many times, and fate finally demanded payment. Each escape, each narrow survival was viewed as a temporary bargain with forces larger than himself. By 1926, the debt had come due. The eerie timing only added fuel to the fire. Houdini, who had spent years debunking seances, died on the very night most associated with ghosts and the supernatural. To his admirers, this coincidence was chilling. To believers in the occult, it was proof that the spiritual world had claimed him. Bess Houdini, his widow, inadvertently fueled the mystery further. Grieving and desperate, she organized seances every Halloween for 10 years after his death. She and Harry had made a pact. If there was life after death, he would send her a secret-coded message only she could recognize. Year after year, mediums claimed to summon his spirit, but the message never came. After a decade of disappointment, Bess announced that she was giving up the ritual, famously declaring, 10 years is long enough to wait for any man. Yet the seances did not end. Other magicians and fans continued them, turning Houdini's death into a yearly ritual of speculation and wonder. The Houdini curse became part of his mythology, the idea that his defiance of death had finally provoked cosmic retribution. Skeptics dismiss the curse as pure superstition. To them, Houdini was simply a man who ignored a medical emergency until it was too late. But for others, the curse explains what medicine cannot. Why Houdini, of all people, should die in such dramatic, ironic fashion. A century later, the debates remain unresolved. Did Houdini's stubbornness kill him? Or was he doomed by the limitations of 1920s medicine? Was his death an accident or the fulfillment of a curse? Whatever the truth, the questions themselves are part of the reason Houdini endures. He was never just a man, he was a mystery. And even in death, the world cannot stop asking, what really happened to Harry Houdini? The final trick theory. Some fans believe Houdini orchestrated his own death, or at least left behind a final trick designed to cement his immortality. According to this view, Houdini knew his body was failing. The constant strain of escapes, the injuries, the exhaustion, all of it had taken a toll. Rather than fade away, he may have embraced a dramatic exit, ensuring that his death would be as mysterious as his life. This theory is, of course, speculative, but Houdini himself had often hinted at his desire to transcend death. He promised Bess a secret code they would use if he ever returned from the afterlife, daring spiritualists to prove themselves. He had built a career on blurring the lines between reality and illusion. Would it be so surprising if he blurred that line one final time? The impact of his death. Regardless of the cause, Houdini's death sent shockwaves across the world. Newspapers ran front-page obituaries, mourning the man who had defied death until it finally claimed him. Tens of thousands attended his funeral in New York City. His body was placed in a bronze coffin he had once used as part of his act, as if even in death, Houdini could not escape the theater of spectacle. For his fans, the loss was devastating. Houdini was not just a performer, he was a symbol of hope, proof that human beings could conquer any restraint. His death felt like a betrayal, a reminder that even the greatest escape artist could not escape mortality. But in death, Houdini achieved something greater than he could have in life. His passing transformed him into legend. Houdini's afterlife in popular culture. In the century since his death, Houdini's legend has only grown. Films, books, and television shows have kept his name alive. He has become a metaphor for resilience, a shorthand for anyone who escapes impossible odds. Theories about his death continue to fascinate. Was it a freak accident, a conspiracy, a curse, or a final trick? Each possibility adds to the myth, ensuring that Houdini is never forgotten. Bess Houdini's seances, though ultimately fruitless, further cemented the legend. Each Halloween, people still gather to remember Houdini, some even holding seances in his honor. 100 years later, the line between man and myth is almost impossible to untangle. Why the truth still matters. So why does the truth of Houdini's final trick matter, even a century later? Because it speaks to something deeper than a magician's death. It speaks to the fragility of life, the dangers of obsession, and the price of ambition. If Houdini died from a simple case of appendicitis, it reminds us that even the strongest bodies can be undone by the smallest failures. If he was assassinated by spiritualists, it shows the risks of challenging powerful enemies. If it was a curse, it illustrates humanity's need to explain the inexplicable. And if it was his final trick, it proves that Houdini achieved exactly what he wanted: immortality through mystery. In the end, the truth may be a combination of all these theories. Perhaps the punches weakened him, the delay in surgery doomed him, and the lack of medical technology sealed his fate. Perhaps spiritualists rejoiced, curses were imagined, and myths were born. What remains undeniable is that Houdini's death was not just the end of a man, but the beginning of a legend. 100 years later, Houdini's final act continues to defy explanation. Was it an accident, an assassination, a curse, or a carefully orchestrated illusion? The world may never know. What is certain is that Houdini achieved in death what he pursued in life, the impossible. He escaped the confines of time, living on in legend, his story retold generation after generation. His final trick wasn't chains, water tanks, or straitjackets. It was something far greater, transforming death itself into a mystery that still captures the imagination of millions. And that, more than any escape, may be the greatest illusion Houdini ever performed. Harry Houdini built a life on defiance. Defiance of chains, of gravity, of limits. Yet his death a century ago proved that even legends cannot escape mortality. And perhaps that was his greatest trick of all. By leaving the world in mystery, Houdini ensured he would never be forgotten. His escapes ended in 1926, but his legend never did. For Hollywood and history, Houdini remains the master of illusion, a man whose final act blurred the line between fact and myth. Was his death a tragic accident, a spiritualist's revenge, or a calculated step into immortality? The truth may never be known. What endures is the fascination, the wonder, and the unshakable belief that Houdini, even in death, found a way to outwit us all. But what do you think? Was Houdini's final trick simply an unfortunate end, or was it the ultimate illusion, one that still leaves us guessing 100 years later? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love uncovering the untold stories of history's greatest legends, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You're watching Icon Legends, where the truth behind the legend is finally revealed.